About 1 month ago, I started a 4-part series where we explored the same retirement spending goal with 4 different asset levels. We did that for Ross and for Rachel. And a number of you asked me to do the exact same type of case study, but for a single person. And so this is video 1 of the 4-part series where we will be exploring Frasier Crane. Let's get into it. So as a quick reminder before I get into the video, whenever I do content that's geared more towards single people, my views usually fall off and I have to dig myself out of a little bit of a hole with YouTube. So this is me please asking you to like and share this video so that I can continue doing content like this, because I love doing content like this. Now, let's get back to Frasier. What I set out to do was to do the exact same case as Ross and Rachel. $500,000 to start, wanting to spend $60,000 per year and retiring January 1 of next year, which ironically was his, along with Ross and Rachel's, 65th birthday. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to bring you into the software without any planning whatsoever, and you can see just how stark of a difference it is between a couple and a single person. So when it was a couple, there was no years of financial difficulty and they had a 105% goal achievement. In this case, Frasier starts to run into some financial difficulty in the year that he turns 76. That is way too early. If I go to my comparison tool, which kind of summarizes a couple of things here, he only has a 59% goal achievement, unlike the 105%. So right away, I want to address this because this is a bit of a bummer and this might be very discouraging to you, but I don't want you to feel too discouraged, and here's why. There are 2 sides to every coin with a financial plan, and spending is a big one of those things. And I have met many single people over the years doing this, doing their financial plans that did not have $500,000, but are comfortably retired or will comfortably retire because their spending expectations are different. In fact, very recently, I met a single person who had a very modest pension, which I don't have things like pensions in here, but a very modest pension and somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 of investments that they had really put together over the last 5 to 6 years. And because of different expectations towards spending, they're also a little older than 65. The financial projections were looking very comfortable for them. So don't feel discouraged by this. Yes, if you are single and you're in this boat, maybe you have to do some spending expectation changes or whatever it is for your scenario. But there are absolutely cases where people have less than $500,000 that can retire very comfortably. It's just I wanted to highlight the stark difference between a couple and singles with no other changes, which really is a result of our taxation system. So after doing some planning for Frasier, we've adjusted withdrawal order in terms of which assets are going to be leaned on first. We've adjusted CPP to maximize that. And in this case, I'm also recommending that he sell his condo at age 70 and starts to rent from there. And because I'm using Ontario, I'm using a $2,500 per month rent. That's just the inflated version of it here. We've pushed off the shortfalls quite a bit, but they're still at age 82, which is way too soon. So planning without changing the spending expectation of $5,000 a month or $60,000 per year, planning can only do so much, and it's pushing Frasier about 6 to 7 years between shortfalls. Now, the reality is most people will not spend at the same pace all the way into their 80s. So I could probably do a little bit more finagling here with spending and start dropping it 1-2% per year in his 70s and 80s, which would help, but certainly not solve the issue. The bigger issue for someone like Frasier in this case is I would probably go to spending. So let's look at how that turned out. So here's Frasier's scenario here. I've dropped his spending from $5,000 a month to $4,000 a month. He's trimmed $1,000 per month out of his spending. Much easier said than done. I've made no other changes in this particular case. He still is keeping his condo. And if I go down, this alone has pushed his shortfalls to age 84. $1,000 a month is a pretty significant savings. If you think to what I kind of jokingly call Chad's ratio, for every $1,000 you want in retirement, you need about $200,000 to $250,000 invested. So if we flip that on its head, cutting $1,000 per month out of his projection is like finding $200,000 to $250,000. So that's kind of how I look at that spending reduction. So in this case, he's running out of money around age 84. So once again, I would go back to the condo. And in this case, I have him selling it at 75 because it's not quite as dire. So now scrolling down, his rent doesn't start until the year he turns 75. And again, I just have that inflating along the way with a 2.5 inflation rate. And if we go down, Frasier now only starts to see financial difficulty around age 88. The other important thing to remember here is I don't necessarily have fun built in here. The $4,000 or $5,000 per month that Frasier was saying he wants to spend in retirement may just be his day-to-day spending. So you can see again, there's a very, very large difference between a couple with $500,000 with this spending expectation and an individual. Now, I think back over the plans I've done over the last number of years, again, it keeps coming back to it's a two-sided coin. I have many clients who are comfortably retired with less than $500,000 because they don't spend to this level. What I want you or what I want Frasier to find is a level that you're comfortable for your day to day. And then you can tack on some special spending as well for travel or activities. So for someone like Frasier, I'd really want him to go, if he's not willing to work any further, I really want him to go down probably somewhere around $3,500 a month for his basic stuff. And that excludes rent for those rental years down the road. But then he can factor in a little bit for some extra fun money. So make sure you come back next week for part 2 of this series where suddenly Frasier will have won the lottery and have $750,000 as opposed to $500,000. The question I'm going to pose to you is, will that or will that not wipe out all of his financial difficulties? Tune in next week to see. If it's time for me to review your financial plan, there will be a link in the description down below that comes directly to me. Until next time, keep planning.